Naphtali's Canaanite connections? Yep, what's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city. Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's doing well up in here. You know what I mean? Big up to KJ checking in. And as always, if you have not yet already, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend that's him again. We're trying to get to 6,000 subs by the end of the year, and that can only happen if my people in the chat spread the word, share the content, share the link that's live right now, and if there's a favorite video I've done that you guys really like, please feel free to share that. All right, it costs you nothing to do so. And if you like how it goes down with BK, you can show your appreciation via the PayPal link that's pinned on top of the chat. Or if you want to be a monthly supporter of BK, you can become a Patreon. We get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. All right. Facts over interpretation. Okay. Good to see you. So tonight we're gonna do a little commentary on a video from a lady by the name of Naphtali. She is a Hebrew Israelite. I'm not certain exactly where she lands within the landscape of Hebrew Israelism. Because as we know, the the Hebrew Israelites are not a monolith. There's a spectrum. They vary in many different things. But she did a video about these alleged Canaanite connections with North America. And so I want to look at a couple of these clips and have some commentary. And I disagree. And again, this is more about a teaching moment of just really being accurate. Oh, thank you, facts over interpretation. Appreciate that. We just gotta do better when it comes to our methodology, our research methodology, and you know, and again, it has nothing to do with the claim that you believe that you are a Hebrew Israelite, unless you believe that claim is salvific. Then we're gonna have a problem. Okay, but unfortunately, many within this field, provide a lot of misinformation, and but in a weird way, they're being consistent because the way they read things into the Bible, they kind of do that with historical documents as well. Right. So, with that being said, let's get into this first clip.
All the way back in early Genesis, if we want to get technical. So I also mentioned Dighton Rock. So right here, we see Dighton Rock. This is another source that showcases that the Phoenicians were here in the Americas. Right here, we see Phoenician inscriptions. We have Ezra Stiles. He was the president of Yale, declared the figures on this rock were Phoenician. So in 1767, Ezra Stiles, the president of Yale, had declared the figures on this rock that they were indeed Phoenician. So again, we have more Phoenician inscriptions found right.
So the first thing here is Dighton Rock. That the claim here by Ezra Stiles is that this rock that's been found here in America is actually Phoenician in writing. That it comes from meaning that the Phoenicians were in the Americas. Right? So let's get into that real quick. All right, so make sure you guys see it. Yep. This is from Douglas Hunter, The Place of the Stone, Dighton Rock, and the Erasure of America's Indigenous Past. Archaeologist Steph Williams has called it, quote, the most frequently documented artifact in American archaeology. Depending on how finely the theories are sliced, anywhere from 20 to more than 30 proposals have been made. The markings have included Phoenicians, in which Naphtali is saying, pirates, the lost tribes of Israel, Egyptians, an expedition from Atlantis, and Norsemen. Very popular rock, a lot of popular theories. All right. A migrationist link between Phoenician and Native Americans based on the Dighton Rock inscription was already circulating at least privately among American antiquaries, as the diary and correspondence of Ezra Stiles, who she mentioned, had shown. But Anton Court de Gablin was the first person to make the assertion in print when he published his interpretation, accompanied by a labeled drawing in the 8th volume of Monde Primitif. Stiles had praised Manasseh ben Israel's character in his diary in January 1782 and essentially agreed with the hope of Israel in rejecting the idea that Native Americans were descendants of the lost tribes, which had recently been promoted by James Adair in the History of American Indians. Stiles also implicitly agreed with Manasseh that Native Americans were Tartar migrants whose origin styles stretched back to the cursed Canaanites. It was important to Stiles to herd all Native Americans into the role of Canaanites, cursed by Noah to be subservient to the Jebusite whites, and also to not have them be descendants of the lost tribes, which would have implied that they were capable of redemption and improvement and would have strengthened their right to lands coveted by the new republic. So Stiles had an agenda, right? He wanted to make sure that these things were latched on to the Native Americans as Canaanites. Why? Because if they were Israelites, because you got to remember, in the New World, they come into the Americas and they see this people group that they haven't really had contact with prior to this, and the conversation is, well, what do we do with these guys? Because we want their land, but they're other human beings. How can we do what we want to do and not look crazy? So Stiles wanted to make sure that, well, if they're Canaanites, then they're cursed, and therefore we have the rights to take their land from them. So the reason why he believed the rock was Phoenician, he wanted it to be Phoenician, not because he was a sincere anthropologist and was allowing the data to take him where he wanted. No, he had a racist agenda. He wanted to make sure that people looked at the natives of this land as savages, which is crazy because, many of the people of the Hebrew Israelite persuasion would consider the Native Indians, Native Americans, Israelites. Mr. Stiles did not. The person that she quoted from adamantly said, no, they have to be Canaanites because I need them to be Canaanites, because if they're Israelites, then they're worthy of redemption and we can't take their land. But if they're Canaanites, then they are subservient, they're cursed, and we can take their land. So unbeknownst to Naphtali, she's actually propagating a racist understanding of this rock. Now, I'm not saying that Naphtali knew this. I'm under the assumption that she is for Black people, right? So I'm not saying she's but it is kind of ironic that the person that she's quoting has this particular agenda. But anyway, by Monde Primitif, Court de Gibling meant a root or primal age preceding the recorded history of the Greeks and Romans that was the source of global culture and knowledge. He was determined to reconstruct this golden age through language, mythology, and symbology. And his quest shortly would bring him into contact with Harvard Stephen Sewall, who in turn will lead him to the impenetrable mystery of Dighton Rock. So this guy that's caught the Giblin, he was interested in Dighton Rock because it fits the narrative that he's trying to reconstruct as well. Okay? Court de Giblin never crossed the ocean to view the markings himself, but the prominent French Freemason would not be deterred from inducting them into his esoteric worldview with an imaginative extravagance not yet witnessed in the rock's interpretation. Court de Giblin would turn a Native American relic into a symbolically verbose work of Phoenician adventurers. So Styles wanted it to be Canaanites because he was a racist and he wanted to justify the taking of indigenous people's land. Court de Giblin, he was also fascinated with having this prove his esoteric understanding of the origin of the world. So again, they both have agendas that's not being purely, academic. Dighton Rock, America's oldest and most contested antiquarian puzzle, would find fresh currency in a debate increasingly charged with Enlightenment concepts of human migration and racial fitness that still embody convictions of white destiny rooted in biblical hermeneutics. Esotericism would figure in that debate because it was entwined with Enlightenment inquiries, unsustainably propelled by reason, as the connections Court de Giblin forged with American scholarly community reiterate. So he's going about this under the guise of an academic pursuit, but his pursuit is about his esoteric understanding of the origin of the world. But, he's framing it as a scholarly inquiry, okay? Court de Giblin reading of Dighton Rock has more details than we need to review. He imagined, that is the only word, that rock as a triptych with panels devised by the Phoenicians in right to left order devoted to the past, their arrival in America, their present, their alliance with the people of the country, and their future, their plans to return home. He found an owl, which he explained was the symbol of Minerva, Isis, and Astarte, deities of wisdom and the arts. There was also a hawk, which he said symbolized to the Egyptians and Phoenicians the north wind necessary for the return voyage. Remember, he's never physically seen this rock. he's already going by like drawing sketches, things of that nature. He's never seen the rock for himself. But again, that's okay. He's filling in the gaps to create this correlation within his esoteric worldview. With Kendall, the debate over the nature of Dighton Rock, now more than a century old, appeared to have found a firmly rationalist footing that could steer clear of transatlantic Gnosticism, Phoenician adventures, and dark Enlightenment esotericism. However, Kendall's analysis shows how pervasive esotericism was in intellectual circles at the end of the 19th century. His initial writings on Dighton Rock were steeped in Masonic allusions that have gone unnoticed as his analysis brought the rock and with it Native Americans into a Masonic diffusion of ancient Hermetic knowledge. And if you've been a subscriber to BK, we've every time we get into the weeds, Hermes Trismegistus always pops up, right? The Corpus Hermeticum, the Enlightenment era, a lot of what these Black identity cults glean from, they actually glean from Hermes Trismegistus. And here we are again. Kendall did so in association with prominent American antiquarians who were also well-known Masons through Freemasonry and related esoteric initiatives. The root culture shared by all peoples as advocated by Naphtali in the early 18th century became a foundational knowledge of civilization's art in the possession of a privileged secretive few, and of the greatest benefit to whites who preserve and propagate it among themselves. Again, there's a racial underpinning to all this quote unquote anthropology and archaeology, right? They're looking for solid intellectual footing to justify the taking of the land of these indigenous people. All right. So now we went through all these various, theories, right? These theories were as wrong as every other theory has been, save one. The markings, as they were initially observed in 1680, were made at some unknown point in the past to an end that may never be fully understood by indigenous people, if not specifically the Wampanoag, who lived in the rocks vicinity in the 17th century, or the collective Algonquian speaking peoples of southern New England, the Nemish or their ancestors. Then a broad cultural class incorporating different historical, tribal, and language groups that archaeologists call Eastern Woodlands. So after all that throughout the centuries, this esoteric underpinning, no, it's Phoenician, no, it's this, it's the Vikings, no, it's the, like, bro, indigenous people wrote on the rock. What indigenous people? The indigenous people that lived in that area. Like, that's what it is. That's what it is. I base my pronouncement of an indigenous providence not on any expertise on my part in interpreting glyphs or on some exciting technological breakthrough in examining the rock surface, but on noting that this providence was apparent from the beginning of European and Anglo-American inquiries, was the least cumbersome and most plausible explanation, and was repeatedly asserted by individuals familiar with indigenous glyphs and inscribed stones in Eastern North America. Advocates for alternate theories have had more than 300 years to make an interpretation stick to the satisfaction of scholarly peers, and have failed repeatedly and resoundingly. So, that's crazy. But so people were already telling people from the area was like, yeah, it was the indigenous people. They didn't want to hear that. Ezra Styles did not want to hear that. No. These are Canaanites. These dudes are Canaanites. And they're cursed. So we could take their land. This other dude, Gibron, yeah, but I'm more into my esoteric worldview, and this fits. Well, I'm gonna make it fit into my worldview. And by doing so, you take away, what indigenous people have done. And that was the underlying agenda all along. Like, we need to come up with reasons that will help us sleep better at night to take their land. And again, I don't think Naphtali knew this. I don't think if she knew this, she would present it. All right. So I'm not charging her with that. But again, this is the importance of, having a robust research methodology, looking into things. And, because now we see that there was a big charade to propagate a racist agenda to take the land. All right. So with that being said, let me get this next clip ready. I think we are ready already. Yeah. So let's get to it. Shout out to Michelle, Bodega Ladies, on the check-in. All right, here we go.
Right here, and again, the Phoenicians are the Canaanites, found right here in the Americas. And then, of course, I mentioned America's Stonehenge. Okay, now Stonehenge is not in the South America. This is actually found here in the United States. It's actually found here in New Hampshire, in Salem, New Hampshire. And what's so interesting about this is that they say that this actually here is sacrificial stone. So actually what took place here was sacrificing and bloodletting. So and this was something that the Phoenicians are known for, as far as sacrificing, human sacrifice. And right here we see that America's Stonehenge is the same as what we see in Europe. Also, as well as found in the Mesopotamian regions where the Canaanites were located.
So, I mean, the eye test alone would show you that this doesn't look like Stonehenge. Unless she means that there's stones around, right? It don't look like Stonehenge. I get why they call America Stonehenge, but it doesn't look like it, right? So that's one. Okay. So there's that. But let's get into this. Okay. And here's a photo of it, right? Of the alleged Phoenician slaughterhouse, if you will. So we're gonna look at this book called Frauds, Myths, and Mysteries, Science and Pseudoscience in Archaeology. And it says this. Consider this convergence of evidence concept in reference to a large stone artifact exhibited at the Mystery Hill site, a key place in Fell's argument. The North Salem, New Hampshire site consists of numerous stones, structures, and features. William Goodwin, a retired insurance executive from Hartfield, Connecticut, purchased the site in 1937 and spent the rest of his life rebuilding parts of it and trying to prove that it was the settlement of ancient Europeans, specifically Irish Cody monks in the 10th century AD. So the guy who brought the land says that it's the Irish monks from 10th century. He's not saying it's Phoenician. And, he rebuilt it, right? So I don't know what kind of stuff he did to the site as well, but he's not saying it's Phoenician. Certainly, the owners of the site have little doubt concerning the function and purpose of one specific artifact at the site. They direct you to a slab of stone with a sign saying, "To the sacrificial table." So they're letting you know that they consider that slab that we saw earlier. Let me show you again. That little slab right here, that's a quote unquote sacrificial table, right? But on what do they base their supposition that the object in question was used in a grisly ceremony marked by human sacrifice? Is there a convergence of evidence, multiple independent sources of information that leads to the conclusion that ancient European settlers of New Hampshire conducted human sacrifices here? For example, are there similar sacrificial tables dated to antiquity in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, or England? In fact, no. But there are 19th century paintings presenting fantastical tableaux of fake druid sacrifices that might inspire someone to imagine the use of the Mystery Hill stone as just such a sacrificial altar. As a side note, we know virtually nothing of the ancient practices of the Druids. Everything that you have probably read or seen in a documentary is speculative at best. We do not know. We don't have any liturgy, amulets, statues, books, sketch, nothing. We have nothing of the ancient Druids. So every time you see someone talk about the Druids, they're being speculative at best. Okay? So yeah, someone to imagine the use of the Mystery Hill stone as just such a sacrificial altar. Has human blood residue been found in the interstices of the crystals in the stone? No such evidence has been published. Has sacrificial daggers of bronze been found at the site or nearby in New Hampshire? Again, no such evidence has been presented. But you see how they're going about it is like, are there multiple sources? Are there other artifacts that would coincide with the concept of a sacrificial altar, i.e., blades, right? Some sort of dagger, like that would help, strengthen the claim that this has something to do with some sort of sacrifice. Okay, there's none of that. None of this has been found. Blood residue hasn't been found on it. Nothing. No evidence. In fact, the only evidence or proof presented in support of the hypothesis that the artifact is a sacrificial table is that some people think it looked like what they expect a sacrificial table to look like. Nothing more, and that's not nearly enough. Viewed more closely, the quote sacrificial table presents us with a convergence of evidence leading to a far different interpretation. In fact, stone slabs with channels etched or carved on their surfaces, including apparent exit channels for the collection of whatever liquid was accumulated on the stone surface, are widely known in colonial New England and recognized for what they were. Their context, when they have been found in place, shows their use in farm industries, not sacrifice, but rather more mundane production of lye, soap, and apple cider. So they would use those kind of slabs for this kind of production, for farm industry, soap and apple cider. After historical descriptions of cider production, including the use of a wooden base or bedstone looking a lot like the sacrificial altar stone in Mystery Hill, another stream of evidence is the material record with surviving examples of similar artifacts, all originally found in farming contexts. The Mystery Hill artifact is not unique, mysterious, or surprising. Similar artifacts have been found, all dating to the 18th and 19th centuries, and their historical context suggests their use as cider press bedstones. Oh, and to make things clear, there's no indication of an ongoing widespread practice of human sacrifice and blood collection on the part of New England's colonial farmers. So they found other similar contraptions, and they know that these contraptions have been used to do these farming practices of the apple ciders and soaps. But besides that, it's also well attested that these New England colonial farmers weren't into human sacrifices. It's just not there. Right? There's literally no evidence that this was used as some sort of sacrificing table. There are no other tables like that in New Hampshire. There's no daggers, no other utensils that you would think would be around a sacrificing table. And not even any blood splatter or ancient blood, nothing. All right. So with that, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going here. Give me a minute, guys. Let me see here. Yeah, we're going to keep going here. All right. All right, here we
go. Originally. So, and let's not forget the Paracas giants whose DNA goes back to the Mesopotamian region. We must remember some of these large elongated skulls unearthed from the cemeteries in Paracas, Peru, possess anomalous anatomical features, such as only 2 cranial plates and only 1 suture, as well as the brain capacity of over 1,500 cms, which is larger than many of the skulls today. It says these skulls, which are between 1,500 to 3,000 years old, have been described by many researchers as evidence for the Nephilim, the sons of the Anak. Between 1880 through 1947, several hundred mummified bodies were excavated from burial sites in the Paracas Peninsula of Peru. Now, It says the royalty of the Parakas have been found to have been red hair, and DNA analysis confirmed they were originally from the Middle East.
So she's quoting somebody by the name of Brian Forrester, and they're talking about these elongated skulls. If you spend any time on the interwebs, you've seen various pictures like this. And they would say that these people are, like the Nephilim, the skeletons of fallen angels and things like that. Now, this skeleton is correct. This is an actual skeleton. But where does it come from? Right? That's the question. It is a real skeleton. It's a real skull. It's not made up. But let's see, where does this originate from? Okay. So here's the slide that she showed, right? So this is from the Elongated Skulls Mystery Really Isn't a Mystery at All by Kyle Fegans from Pseudo Archaeology. There are several ways to modify the skull, such as trepanation and dental adjustments. But the primary aspect of ACM we're concerned with in this article is that of intentionally shaping the cranium. That is to say, changing the shape of the skull in infancy in order to achieve a desired morphological outcome. While this could be done unintentionally, such as through the practice of cradle boarding, the intentional practice involves binding and often bracing methods where the skull is wrapped tightly and perhaps braced with boards or sticks to create pressure to the desired direction of cranial growth. When a child is newborn to approximately age 3, the skull is a very palatable state. Firm, consistent pressure can direct cranial growth in different directions, depending on the method of binding. There are ethnographic and archaeological accounts of binding the heads of shaping in Greece, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Australia, Melanesia, North America, Central America, and so on. Every continent on Earth has evidence of ACM. This is not a practice archaeologists, anthropologists, and sociologists are completely unfamiliar with. In fact, the part about the practice of ACM that is most mysterious is a what, as in what motivated people to do it, rather than a how, as in how did these people get here? Or how did their heads get this way? And here's some pictures. Right, there's a Hmong Batu woman and her child with head bindings. This is how you get your head to change shape. Very early on in infancy, they start binding the head. And here are some, adults as you see the process. They're not aliens. These are very much human people. Right? And again, and I know Naphtali doesn't mean this, but it's kind of disrespectful to say that these indigenous people of these different lands are aliens or Nephilim. They're some sort of angel human hybrid. No, these are just regular human beings who believe that this looks very beautiful in their culture. It's a cultural thing. And you could disagree if it's beautiful or not, but it's their culture and we should respect that. Right? To say that it's something else when it's not. So we just got to be more careful when we make statements because we can discredit other people's cultures. Okay? So something to look out for. When showing the skull of a person that apparently resides in a museum on display and indignantly handled in a most pseudoscientific manner of casual disregard one can think of for the deceased, Forrester notes that the cranium has only two plates, one frontal and one pectoral, which he states is not normal for humans, except he's wrong. This is quite normal in human skulls. The suture that separates the two pectoral bones is called the sagittal, and it can close and ultimately obliterate with age. Not in everyone, and not in any specific year, but often between the ages of 50 to 60 years for the sagittal. Other sutures might close as early as 18 or as late as age 70. Other sutures in the cranium are lambdoid, coronal, and pectoral mastoid, pectoral temporal, and basal occiput, with basal sphenoid. So the guy, and she plays the video of this guy, this Forrester, and he's kind of like manhandling the skulls. Like, these are human skulls. He's just manhandling. It's like he's not really giving it the proper respect, you know. And again, I'm not saying that you can't touch skulls, you know, but let's do it with at least a little bit of decorum and respect, you know. But he doesn't feel the need to, because, well, these are, hybrid demons or something, and they're not. These are indigenous people of color. This was their culture. This is what they found beautiful in their culture. And to make it, make it into like this conspiracy thing, it's not cool. It's just not cool. All right. So just wanted to share that. And again, I do not believe that Naphtali's agenda was to reinforce racist agendas for Native and Indigenous people. I don't think that she was trying to make a point about the Canaanites and, but based on what we've seen, on the research, she's incorrect, right? But again, that's why we have to be careful when we present certain things, because she kind of reinforced a lot of racist archaeology. She did. Again, I totally believe that was not what her intent was. Totally. I don't know her. We've never. I mean, we had a couple of things back and forth on Facebook, but she's never been disrespectful to me. I have, we good, but this is why we gotta be careful when we bring information out, because unbeknownst to her, she's reinforcing racist pseudo archaeology, right? So we gotta be careful, and that includes me. That includes all of us. Anybody who steps up here on, who has Facebook or TikTok and they want to go and teach things, we gotta make sure that what we have is correct. Crossing T's, dotting I's. So I hope she takes this well. But again, we have to be careful, and I hate to say it, but it's kind of part and parcel of what we run into when it comes to the Hebrew Israelite spectrum. A lot of this comes from just a bad reading of the text as well. And it permeates and it spills over in other aspects of what they try to convey to us. Okay? So, with that being said, guys, this is BK signing off. Peace.